Not new, not just news. I'm gonna show you by popular demand, as promised. I'm trying to keep my promises. I don't always do that, but I'm doing my best here. Is to show you, go back and go over quickly acute treatment of COVID, just so everybody's review and renew. So the basic news, the kind of significant news which I felt is important to discuss, going into a fall quickly, there's of course multiple experts who claiming that we pretty decent chances of having yet another spike or another wave of COVID. Currently, numbers are dropping quickly, about 10-15% decrease every month for the past 3 months of the total number of infections, as well as number of people who are getting complications. So that's a good news. But the concerns are following. So one is just the current variants that are already circulating are going to come back. Another bigger concern is this variant that's called, let me put it in the chat, BA 2.75.2. So I want everybody to keep an eye for this particular subvariant of BA2. It's not BA2-0.75. That's the most very common one right now. But the one that has another point and then 2 is the minority fraction, but it seems to be resistant to every existing treatment, and it even evades not just vaccines, but even tests. So this one, and there is no current, the research is currently done on BA 2.75. They're just starting to do research on BA 2.75.2. So it's TBD as to whether any current treatment is going to do any good against this one. And so it's not currently designated as a strain of interest by WHO, mostly just because it's still very minor fraction. In US, it's about it's less than 1%, but it is in almost all the states currently, as of what I just read from last week. So keep an eye on this strain. If this one's gonna exponentially become the popular one, we may have serious concerns. Other than that, I don't have any more news, and let me share my slides and walk you quickly through the presentation. Okay, does everybody see the slides? Can I get confirmation from someone?
Yes, we can see them.
So, yeah, first of all, we've talked about the diet, we've talked about some basic things. I'm going to show you just the core set of supplements. This is the core, and then there is a kind of a secondary, and then I'll show you some ideas for just the fever management. Those are the only 3 things I want to cover. So again, the quercetin, and it probably doesn't matter what brands you get. I would say the only specific brands you should be getting are for the glutathione. That's an actually important one, because the poor quality glutathione is not going to do anything. And if you don't want to bother with glutathione, just getting NAC 600 milligrams or 900 milligrams twice a day is fine. NAC is not always, or glutathione, easy to find in the regular stores. So if you're concerned enough, you probably want to stock up. NAC is going to be good for many years, for probably at least 2 or 3 years. So you could just get a bottle of NAC and have it in the house. By the way, most of the supplements, if you're only taking them for a couple of weeks, I can't think of any contraindication of any kind, unless you're allergic to a particular component of something, or if you've done something in the past and you've had some kind of side effects, like maybe, let's see, zinc in some people can cause diarrhea, so can, of course, vitamin C. The vitamin C is, you don't have to go very high. It is recommended you try to at least know what your upper limit of intake is. So if you're starting to go, let's say 2, 3, 4,000 milligrams in one particular dose, and if you start getting loose bowel movements, that's your tolerance level. Most people probably can tolerate upwards of 5 grams, 5,000 milligrams very easy. But, you also don't have to go very crazy here, because frankly, you're probably saturating your system with just 1,000, and it may be even better to take it more frequent rather than higher dose. Liposomal vitamin C, that always comes up. I'm yet to see a single study showing that it's actually somehow advantageous over regular vitamin C. And something that costs 10 times more than the basic cost always concerns me, that advocacy relates more to the income generated here rather than the true science. So I'm going to wait until we see some science about liposomal formulation. Turmeric is actually an important one because you expect, the same with quercetin, you expect to be into kind of a short inflammatory storm. So you want to try to curb that down. Those are the nutrients. If you have food-based turmeric and you like the taste of it, the teaspoon twice a day would be more than enough. Just make sure you put some fat and some crushed black pepper in it to get absorption a little bit higher. But the capsules are fine too. This last one is an AD plus or nicotine riboside, is kind of an obscure one. This one is very important if you're concerned that the COVID is going to cause long-term fatigue. This is the kind of a natural precursors to the formation of NADH and FADH, which are the energy molecules generated in the mitochondria in the Krebs cycle. And those seem to work reasonably well, especially if you have a very high dose for brief period of time during kind of the crash times when your energy is taken away to combat the virus. So, and then there are tons of other stuff that can be done. Of course, vitamin A, there are certain direct antiviral tinctures, which are based on herbals. I know that Dr. Embrey is going to talk about homeopathy. I think it's also wonderful options, but I'm not putting them here since she's going to talk to us a little bit about it. Although I think the acute management of COVID with homeopathy should probably be based on symptoms rather than based on COVID, quote unquote. But again, I'd love to hear Dr. Embrey's opinion on that. Some of this, so UGCG is green tea, for selenium and is an antioxidant. Melatonin, we've talked about a lot, can be very effective acutely, especially if you have a lot of discomfort, and it may help you to fall asleep and sleep better at night. And boswellia, bromelain are other supplements. One of my favorite ones is this D-hist and BCQ. BCQ is a bromelain, curcumin, so turmeric, and quercetin all in one setting. And then D-hist is NAC. Well, I guess I shouldn't be talking about particular products. I think we have that rule, right? Oh, well, I already said it. Too late now. Anyway, those are just combination products. So you don't have to okay, I'm going to take one capsule of each, and then you have 5 bottles to be taken versus just one. And last but not least, the ice packs you should only use if the fever gets totally out of hand, like basically 103 and above, when you start getting a real serious discomfort and, more importantly, concerns for some more complications like seizures. Beyond that, I probably wouldn't do it. And the Tylenol and Motrin, I'm not a big fan. I'm putting it up there just because you're probably gonna do that. But definitely homeopathy for fever is very good. And then warming socks, which I think a year ago, so Dr. Urser covered in detail. Tepid bath, I have no idea what that is. It was on my to say list. So with that, I'm gonna stop this part. I think I'm right on time. It's 2:10, and I'll hand it over to our first guest. Dr. Embrey is our GWCM psychiatrist, integrative psychiatrist. She's an outmost local expert in our practice about homeopathy, specifically constitutional homeopathy. And we're super excited to hear her opinion on that. Thank you.
Misha, could you spotlight her, or Lee, could you spotlight her?
How about this?
Hello. All right, thank you, Misha. Let me just share my screen here so I can get the PowerPoint slides up. So it's nice to meet you all. I did join one of these in the past. So this is my second time to join. Now I have a little bit more time on my hands to be able to make space for these meetings. So hopefully I'll be able to come to more of these. So I just want to start by saying that I work at the center. I'm an integrative psychiatrist. I use a lot of homeopathy to help patients who prefer not to start with medications. And, even if they are on medications and if they're experiencing side effects of the medications, or if the medications are, we've kind of maxed out the doses and we're still having symptoms, then, before adding on another medication, I usually try to go for the homeopathics because they're very gentle, but also very effective, without causing too many problems, like some medications can, and even some supplements, kind of depending on the situation. So let me just start my presentation here. All right, so this talk is going to be specifically for winter wellness as we're entering kind of fall and winter. The season's changing, it's getting a little cooler, a little damper, the sun, is going away. Like right now, it's kind of all of a sudden it's cloudy and damp outside, and it's 60 degrees, but it feels like 40 degrees. So I think kind of talking a little bit about some good remedies, to use during this time of year. I will say that I do, like Dr. Kogan was saying, I do prescribe based on the constitution. So kind of taking into account mental, emotional, and physical symptoms to kind of get a complete picture of what the patient will need. But this presentation is specifically for acute situations. And as Misha alluded to, you will, in order to prescribe these remedies too, you will want to match it as well as possible with as many symptoms, other symptoms as possible. So if like the main complaint is runny nose, for example, you want to ask, like, what kind of runny nose, what comes with it? Is there a headache? Is there a sore throat? Is it better with warmth? Is it better with cold? Is it better from motion? Is it better from being still? All these questions can help you identify a good acute homeopathic remedy to use in any situation. But I will say, just kind of a disclaimer, if you are using any of these remedies and you find that they're not helpful, or symptoms are getting worse or something like that, I would encourage you to see a homeopath, because if symptoms aren't getting better, it might mean that you need a different remedy that matches your symptoms a little better. So that's just kind of the disclaimer to this. But and I'm happy to answer questions specifically about each of these remedies if anybody has them. So just going to the next slide. So just basic introduction. What is homeopathy? So it's a 200-year-old system of medicine founded by Samuel Hahnemann, who was a German physician back in the 1800s. And homeopathy is a whole system of medicine in and of itself. So often people confuse homeopathics with just anything that is herbal or nutraceutical, but homeopathics refers specifically to remedies that are highly, highly diluted. There's a lot of debate on, if something is highly diluted, what could possibly be medicinal about it? But that's where you get into the question about, do we have an energetic component to our bodies that can be healed, just like we have your receptors and things like that medications act on. We also have kind of an energetic component to our bodies, and that is accepted by most forms of medicine, other than allopathic medicine. So osteopathic, chiropractic, Chinese medicine, Reiki, a lot of different types of medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, a lot of different types of medicine operate with this understanding that the body is energetic. So that's the idea with homeopathics is, yes, they are highly diluted, but it is thought that they do have an energetic component to them, and that's where the healing properties lie. So it's thought that these substances stimulate the healing process, and then the way they do that is by, you prescribe a remedy for a similar symptom. So it's something called like cures like. So interestingly, these homeopathic remedies, when they are given to healthy people, they produce a certain cluster of symptoms. And then that cluster of symptoms is used to determine what the remedy is supposed to be used for in someone who already has those symptoms. So it's a little tricky. It's not something that it's kind of counterintuitive. We don't usually think of medicine as working that way, but most substances, if they are given in two very different doses, they do have kind of they can either work one way or the opposite way. So for example, a stimulant is another example I like to use. So if you give a stimulant to someone who does not have ADHD, they start bouncing off the walls. But if you give it to somebody who already has ADHD, it causes them to feel calmer and more relaxed and better able to focus. So that's just kind of an example. So I'll move on to the next slide. And feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions because I'm unable to look at the chat. So so just ask me if you
let's just keep the questions in the chat, and I'm just going to keep monitoring the chat box and interrupt if needed. But I think it's better we let you go with your talk.
Okay, sounds good. And I just want to make sure we're keeping it under, I think it's 15 minutes, right? So I want to just keep an eye on the time. So I just want to cover a few conditions in this brief talk. So winter blues, because, you know, as the winter approaches, everybody starts to feel a little dip in their mood with the sun going away. And then grief is another one that, you know, oftentimes around the holidays, people can experience a resurgence of loss when they aren't able to be with certain loved ones that they usually are during this time of year. Anxiety is another one. There's lots of holiday gatherings and parties and, you know, lots of hectic activity around this time of year. Then holiday overindulgence is another one. Colds and flu. And then as Dr. Kogan was talking about COVID-19, I'll do a brief discussion about that. So winter blues, some good remedies for like acute, you know, sadness. Would be sepia. Sepia is a good one. People needing sepia are usually have some chilliness about them. They don't like the damp, the dark, or the coldness of winter. They're usually a lot better if they get a lot of exercise, and they especially like dancing. So sepia is good for you know, people who do much better when they're physically very active.
There's a great question which goes, actually the question itself is one thing, but it's a great point to address as a whole principle. So belladonna is a deliriant, which of course is correct, but talk about how sometimes we use things that at the high dose are very toxic, but at the low dose become detoxifying. So let's just make sure that we address that question that Dariana asked.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there's a concept when the body is stimulated, when the immune system is stimulated, there can be something called a hormetic response. So the process is called hormesis, whereby you can get two different responses to the same medication or the same substance. So with belladonna, like Dr. Kogan was saying, like it's very toxic if you were to take it in a whole dose, and that's because, you know, it's a toxic substance. It has strychnine in it, and it causes high fevers and lots of dryness and things like that. So when a remedy like belladonna, for example, is highly diluted, it actually starts to have the opposite effect. And well, it has opposite effect on someone who has those symptoms. If someone is healthy, it can still produce a fever, actually, in someone who doesn't have any symptoms at all. And that's how these remedies are kind of tested to see what symptoms they cause. So in a healthy person, actually belladonna can cause a fever if it's given in a high enough dose and a high enough frequency. It can produce symptoms. And this is tested in studies called provings. And then that's kind of how you know that belladonna is going to be a good remedy for fever and dryness and delirium and altered mental status, because it's been shown in provings where people volunteer to test these remedies. It's been shown that it actually causes those symptoms. And whenever it causes those symptoms as a homeopathic, it's mild and it passes within a day or two. It's not life-threatening, and it doesn't cause anybody to need to be hospitalized or anything like that, because it's usually very mild and, you know, self-limited. But that's kind of how these remedies are determined it's identified what symptoms they treat in someone who already has those symptoms. So Another toxic substance is rust tox, actually. So it's poison ivy. So people needing rust tox, in the wintertime, they feel a lot of pain. Actually, there's a lot of physical pain, stiffness. It's worse with the cold and cloudy weather. They do a lot better as well if they're able to move around and be in the sun and have some warm weather. Aurum metallicum is actually gold. Aurum, means gold. People needing this remedy in the wintertime, typically they experience a deep depression. But so I would say if someone's needing this remedy, it's probably best that they see a professional. But they often compensate or cope with their depression by working more. And then they sometimes take solace in religion. Phosphorus is another remedy. These people needing this remedy are usually very enthusiastic. So, other times of year, they're very lively. They thrive in the sun. And then when the winter comes, they start to wilt a little bit. But they still have a preference, no matter what the weather is, for ice cream. They really love their ice cream. So if you're noticing anybody has symptoms like these and you feel like, they match any of these pictures, you could certainly try a homeopathic remedy at a dose of, I would say usually 12C is a good safe dose for most people. And 30C is a little bit stronger, and then 200C is definitely, on the higher end. And could actually, if the person is, if it's not a really good match for that person, it could cause problems. So again, if anybody feels like their symptoms are getting worse when they take anything, they need to see a professional. And so just kind of moving on, grief. So these are some good grief remedies. People needing the remedy Ignatia, they typically have perfectionistic tendencies. Their mood can be very changeable, and they can cry and laugh at the same time. The grief tends to be pretty acute. So immediately after a loss, Ignatia is actually a good remedy for a lot of people. Natrium muriaticum is more for chronic grief, where they've lost someone or something, and they have a hard time moving on. People needing natrium muriaticum, and actually natrium muriaticum is table salt. At a homeopathic dose, it becomes very powerful, right? Like if you take natrium muriaticum by mouth, obviously it's in everybody's food, so it's not a problem, unless you have high blood pressure or something, or chronic heart failure. But natrium muriaticum in general is very easily tolerated by most people, but in a homeopathic dose, it becomes a lot more powerful. And interestingly enough, it also involves water. So people are usually unable to cry. They usually have dry mucous membranes as well. They don't like support. They like to have people there to support them, and often that's actually, they really need that. But when it comes to someone giving them any sort of consolation, they really don't like that. People needing Kali carb like to after they've lost someone or something, they have a hard time sleeping. So especially if they're alone, they have a lot of fears at night, and that keeps them awake. And sometimes, especially around 3 to 5 a.m., and they can become very obsessive about their sleep and about things that contribute to them losing sleep. So that's and then usually they're better off when someone is with them and they can provide support. And just let me know if I'm running out of time, and I'll go a little bit faster. Anxiety, these are some good remedies for anxiety. So aconite, aconitum, it's good for agoraphobia. So people needing aconite, they have panic attacks when they go out in public, go out into spaces with a lot of people. Argentum nitricum, it's actually silver nitrate. People needing this remedy have fear of enclosed spaces, so claustrophobia. They fear leaving the house because they fear something bad could happen to them, like they could have an anxiety attack, or they could have any sort of problem where they won't be able to get away. People needing pulsatilla. So pulsatilla is a flower. And people is, windflower. People needing this remedy are very anxious to please others and want to be liked. And they are especially concerned about the opinion of people they are romantically interested in, and they have an intense fear of rejection by the romantic partner. Lycopodium, people needing this remedy usually have fear of social situations and public speaking, and often they feel like they have to put on a facade in order to please others and not to experience rejection. Holiday overindulgence is another issue this time of year. Nux vomica is a really good remedy for this. It's good for people with upset stomach after if you're eating too much or drinking too much, and then the next day you're just feeling a little ill. People can have like some sensitivity to light or sound or odors. There's also a little bit of irritability in people needing nux vomica. Carbovegetabilis is another good one for overindulgence. There can be a lot of gas and bloating and belching with people needing this remedy. And it can also help with, if the person is just feeling really debilitated and not able to kind of move and just kind of wants to lay around and, kind of apathetic. Arsenicum album is a good one too. It's good especially for food poisoning. People needing this remedy, they have the upset stomach with, diarrhea, nausea, and then there can be chills, stomach pain, restlessness. And there can be an intense anxiety, especially related to the idea that they're dying. So some colds and flu remedies. So Calibichromicum is a good one, especially if the mucus is like, there's a lot of sinus drainage, sinus mucus, and especially if it's really thick and yellow and kind of ropey, and they're having a hard time expelling the mucus. Calibichromicum is basically potassium bichromate. Taking this remedy allows that to break up, and they can start clearing it out. Gelsemium is good for people who have watery discharge, so kind of the opposite of that, where it's just kind of profusely coming out. There's a lot of sneezing, and then there's a sense of fullness at the root of the nose. Bryonia is good for people when the colds produce a lot of dry mucous membrane. So there's not a lot of mucus at all. It's just dry. And then there's just kind of a dull pain. And people needing bryonia usually don't like to move. Any sort of movement or any sort of repositioning or anything makes them so much worse. There's a lot of dryness and usually a lot of thirst as well. Actually, bryonia incidentally has been used a lot during the COVID pandemic. A lot of people present with just worse from any sort of movement and just not being able to kind of get out of bed even. Arsenicum is another good one. Usually the nasal discharge in this one, it feels like a burning sensation. They have a lot of chills and they're very cold. Again, I talked about this one before. They have that restlessness and that anxiety. They're very thirsty because they do have some dryness in the throat, but they take just tiny sips of water. And then COVID-19. So there was a small study done. And this is in Brazil. This was published in Homeopathy Journal. Using arsenicum album, homeopathic arsenicum album in the 200C potency just once a week. And it actually showed some pretty good results. So there were actually 3 arms in this study, 3 different groups of people. Some of them were in person, like one group was in person, one group was in person. I think both groups were in person, and then there was one group that was virtual. And the virtual group was actually the group that it's been a while since I read the paper, but interestingly, the group that was virtual actually had more cases of COVID than the group that were in person and receiving the arsenicum. So there's a lot of flaws with the study, like it's not an ideal paper, but I think if you work on take homeopathic as a preventive measure, along with what Dr. Kogan was recommending, arsenicum would certainly be a good one for that. And then that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that came up, but I know we're probably kind of short on time as well. So if we need to move on, that's totally fine.
Let me check if there are questions. There's a one question that I think, Misty, you can just answer directly, and I think that'll be, let's just limit to this one question that Hanifa is asking, and then we'll go to Amin.
Okay. Yeah, so she's saying, what are your thoughts on OSHA, plantain leaf, ginseng, or marshmallow root for COVID symptoms? Also, do you have a preference between tea versus tinctures?
I think that's not a question for you, really, right? Because this is not a homeopathics. Yeah. So
yeah, I think that's a better question for you, Dr.
Yeah, Hanifa, these are not homeopathic remedies. These are herbal products, and they're all pretty good, but they're not actually treating anything COVID related. They're symptoms related treatments. I just want to make sure everybody understand that. So OSHA, plantain leaf, and marshmallow root are very good lung support, especially when there is a large amount of cough, especially if the cough is very productive. So those three herbs are very good for heavy productive cough. And ginseng is a general adaptogen, and it's more for like when you know the energy is going to be crashing soon, and it's a very strong adaptogen. The only thing with ginseng, you have to be careful. Don't take high doses if you're at risk of dropping glucose, dropping sugar, because it's also used in diabetes as a sugar lowering herb. So I hope I addressed that question. Thank you, Misty, so much. And I think we're pretty good on time, and I think we'll hand it off to Amin. And I just want to say that the HeartMath certification was the first thing I've ever done right out of my fellowship when I was starting integrative medicine. It was the most profound tool. Actually, I've had a couple of cases early in my career that were very forming, to the point where I had a patient who couldn't get out of the house, cured in 6 weeks with use of HeartMath. And then she had such a severe panic attacks. And actually, the case was so profound, it got.
Misha, you muted yourself.
How did that happen?
I have no idea.
I didn't touch anything. It's just, I was just saying that I had such a profound early experience with HeartMath when I cured a 25-year-old woman from panic attacks, and the case was so successful that Roland McCarthy and then Doc Chowdhury, who's the kind of the research experts of HeartMath, we published that case a while back. So it gives me pleasure that we actually have an expert who's going to talk about this topic. I mean, make sure you talk a little bit about your practice too, because we would love to hear that, not just summary of HeartMath and what you do. Okay?
Excellent. Thank you. Can everybody hear me fine? Oh, you should be good. Excellent. So we've had a lot of news and a lot of talk, and let's just drop in for a moment before I go into what I had prepared for us. So just take a moment and start focusing your attention in the area of the heart and doing what we call heart-focused breathing. Just imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. You're breathing in a little slower and a little deeper than usual. Just find an easy rhythm that's comfortable for you. Okay, so you go ahead and now you can bring yourself back. And I want to bring my presentation. I have a little slide deck prepared. I'll share my screen. Okay, I'm gonna make sure you all can see my screen.
Yes, yes, we can.
It's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Excellent. All right, I'm gonna minimize this. My mouse disappeared. All right, let's do this. Excellent. And I would do it. This would work second time. Charm. All right. So thanks everyone for joining. What we just did was the basic elements of the HeartMath techniques. HeartMath has created a series of simple, elegant, very easy to use, and extremely effective. As Dr. Colgan was earlier speaking to their power, and I have a story to share with you also regarding this near miraculous, if I use that term, effect of these simple and very effective techniques. So the underlying concept in all of this is that the techniques rely on the intelligence of the heart. Based on a lot of research done by the HeartMath Institute, they found certain qualities of the heart, such as appreciation, gratitude, feeling of joy, being of service, being in care, true care. All of these have a way of uplifting the heart. And from this place, the heart goes into coherence with the brain and synchronizes with the rest of the nervous system and the brain for optimal function, so that the higher brain functions are available, as well as helping with the immune system and the various systems of the body to go into this coherent place. So the focus of the brief talk I'll be giving today, and then I'll do an exercise with you all, is on this intelligence of the heart and its effect for health and well-being. So just a brief talk about myself and what I do. I coach and I train in these techniques. I'm certified HeartMath trainer. I also teach yoga nidra, which is the yoga of sleep that also has similarly therapeutic effects, and as well as a specific kind of holotropic breath work that I do. So all these techniques I teach, I tend to gravitate towards the evidence-based side of the house, and making sure that I teach things that I know are backed by research and evidence. And my joy is to help people unlock the wisdom of their heart and be more creative and experience life from this joyful place I call the experience of joyful living. A bit about HeartMath, as Dr. Colgan was saying also earlier, Doc Children is the founder, and it's a research center as well as an educational institute. It was founded in 1991, and what I want to highlight is the bolded part of it, which is that they have developed a system of effective, scientifically based tools and technologies. I don't have evidence when I do this in person. I usually bring the technology that shows there's an HRV monitor that clips on the ear that takes the pulse, and then guiding people using the technology or the software that shows feedback, and based on that helps improve people's ability to go deeper into the practice. So the coaching still happens, but the tools and the technology help with giving people a feedback of how well they're doing, so that they can practice in between coaching sessions and in between trainings. Then the HeartMath purpose and vision as an institution is to help activate the heart of humanity. So the tools and techniques, again, what they do is help people to self-regulate using this feedback mechanism, and also to reduce stress, increase resilience, unlock intuitive guidance because of, again, the activation of the heart's intelligence, which according to the research done by HeartMath Institute shows that's where the intuition really resides, and not as it's mostly thought to be the brain. So the goal again is to break through to greater levels of personal balance, creativity, insight, health and well-being. Screen here shows some of the research the papers that HeartMath work appeared in various journals, and so far over 300 peer-reviewed or independent studies show that there's a beneficial outcome by using these techniques and technologies. So I have a video here, but I will skip it just because it repeats some of what I have said. So I'll do something better if you let me, which is to tell a story. So let me stop sharing and tell the story. So again, thank you, Dr. Kogan, for this, because you kind of set me up to tell this story very well. The story is what I call a HeartMath story. It's adopted from a book called the HeartMath Solution. It's kind of dated, but it still has a lot of information that's useful for us. So the story is around the experience of a patient, of a client who came in, who was a patient who was having various indications, and she came to HeartMath seminar. And one of the main technique that she actually used is what I'll be practicing with you all today. So the story goes like this. Before Patricia Chapman came to HeartMath, she was a walking time bomb. Her heart was racing at 700 extra beats per hour. Doctors told her that the likelihood of a sudden death from heart condition was high. And Patricia says this: "I was trying to be the perfect mother, the perfect wife, the perfect employee." She explained, "I used to sleep 4 hours a night because there was so much to do. I was so used to that adrenaline rush. I didn't know what it was like not to have it." So although Patricia had a high-stress job at a global computer company, the pace inside her body was killing her. She took extended sick leave. The doctors had given her beta blockers for arrhythmia, as well as Valium for a ventricular tachycardia episode, and 4 surgeries. She almost died from the continued accelerated speed of her heart. When Patricia came to a HeartMath seminar at the advice of one of her physicians, her hair was falling out. She had stomach aches and headaches all the time, and none of her doctors seemed to be able to do much about it. Realizing that she was in a life or death situation, Patricia was determined to try out HeartMath and practice on a regular basis. And here's her speaking to experience. "After my weekend at HeartMath, whenever that adrenaline rush would start to rush again, I was able to stop the trigger. The first day back at work, I got up 8 times and went to the ladies' room, shut myself in, and closed my eyes. That's where I did the practice. Now, I don't need to close my eyes, and I can pull myself back into balance without going anywhere." Her colleagues immediately noticed a difference: less stress and tension and more ease, even during particularly hectic work periods. Her specialists at Stanford University were particularly impressed. Within a few weeks, her doctors were able to take her off Valium. Within 5 months, they decreased the drugs that control her arrhythmia in half. And within 9 months, she had a normal 24-hour ECG recording. There had been no further episodes of ventricular tachycardia. And since she made no other medical or lifestyle, dietary, or exercise changes, Patricia attributes these profound improvements to her use of HeartMath, the solutions, tools, and techniques. Over 4 years later, Patricia is still practicing regularly. Her heart is beating at a normal rate. The ominous time bomb has stopped ticking. She believes that her practice of this heart-focused technique has given her life back. "I now feel calm and absolutely incredible," she says. Patricia's story, like that of many others, make it clear that the sincere application of the heart intelligence can have a dramatic impact on a person's life. So now I have a question for everyone on the call today, which is, would you like to practice the technique that Patricia Chapman used to bring about these changes? Yes, maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great.
Yes.
So this technique is called freeze frame. Freeze frame is one of the oldest technique in the HeartMath toolkit. And it comes out of the concept of a movie. If you think about a movie, it's made of multiple frames. And a lot of what causes us trouble is we see the movie and we continuously replay it. But if we were sometimes to take a step back and freeze a particular frame and have it take a look at it from a slightly more resource-rich state, it takes on a different tone and color and becomes less aggravating and less problematic. The situation sort of resolves itself, or at least the tension that it causes begins to wane, and we will be able to come to a solution that is more in line with what is being called to. So this is the technique. It's called freeze frame. So I'm going to lead everyone in this practice. And before we get started, it has 4 steps. So if you have a pen or a piece of paper, that's fine. You don't need it. But if you do want to take notes on it, it would be helpful to just write down. So you can write down perhaps a problem or an issue that you're currently experiencing. Just pick something, not too big, but just something we can work with and help turn it around with using these techniques. Okay, so acknowledge the problem or the issue, and also check in and see, do you have any issues, or do you have any attitudes or feeling about this issue? What does that look like? Okay, or whatever it is, just note for yourself. Okay, so this is our step 1. Okay. Now we're going to go into the practice itself. This is what we started off. Again, most of the HeartMath techniques are based in this principle, which is the heart-focused breathing. Since you had a taste of that, we're going to do it one more time, and this time we'll do it a little bit slower and deeper. So go ahead and focus your attention in the area of the heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. Breathing in a little slower and deeper than usual. So you may want to count for 5 or whatever rhythm is comfortable for you for the inhale. If you decide that's comfortable, then you want to exhale for the same amount. Okay, let's go ahead and do that. Now let's activate those qualities of the heart that we talked about earlier. So make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something in your life. And breathe this in. Or you can just breathe in calm or ease. Now, from this more objective place, ask yourself, what would be a more efficient or effective attitude, action, or solution to this issue at hand? Looking for a more efficient or effective attitude, action, or solution. quietly observe any subtle changes in perceptions, attitudes, or feelings. Commit to sustaining beneficial attitude shifts and acting on new insights. So this is the main steps involved. Again, if you want to practice later on, I'll send this slide, this part on the slide that goes over the steps. Quick steps would be, first you acknowledge the issue at hand. Then we go into the heart-focused breathing. Activate a positive or renewing feeling. This is activating the heart, the qualities of the heart. And then you ask a question from this place. And then finally you observe and you act from this. This is the basis of the freeze frame technique, the technique that Patricia used in her remarkable journey of transformation and healing.
Amin, there seems to be a question. I don't know whether you or Misha want to
Yeah,
take it.
it's probably better for me to answer. So for the AFib is one of few conditions which usually HeartMath will not work for, because HeartMath is something called heart rate variability, which requires relatively regular heartbeats. Most of the other types of arrhythmias HeartMath can work for. I still recommend trying it out because on some occasions it would work. But in my experience, usually AFib is just the technology is not set up to get this accurately enough picked up, and it's just not going to work. So that's, I think, that question.
Well, do we have any other questions for Amin or for Dr. Embrey? Is she still with us or did she have to jet? It looks like she had to leave.
Yeah, it looks like it.
So feel free to unmute yourselves and ask a question because it's 2:54 unless y'all want to leave early.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Would it work for blood pressure, to lower blood pressure?
Yes, it works very well to lower blood pressure, just like any other biofeedback and relaxation techniques.
Okay.
Worth a try.
Okay,
Salome, remind me, I may have some donated equipment to pass on to you.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Should I do it on chat now or call you?
Message me later.
Okay, thank you.
And I mean, do you mind sharing link to your practice? Is it okay? Maybe
Yes.
put it in a chat if that's easy to.
Yes. Let me go ahead and send my website, and what you could do is once you put in the request, there's an email that will come through, and I will be able to share with everyone. I can also share the slides with Jeanette, and she could share with everyone at the end of the call, because I don't have them separate, so I won't be able to pull them from the rest of it.
That's okay. As long as you email the slides to Janet, we'll get that all sorted out. So.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll take care of it.
Okay, great.
Oh, Dariana, thanks so much for a wonderful comment. All right, so let's just disperse a little earlier. I do want to, just before we go, just want to put out a heart to our friends out in Florida and the whole hurricane situation. And, you know, there's still 2 million people without power and, you know, just a lot of struggle. But also keep an eye on the weather. We're supposed to get lots of rain dumped on us. I heard like a lot of flights gonna get canceled, and you know, so we're gonna not have an easy weekend. I hope that doesn't spoil anybody's weekend plans, and stay warm and dry.